Thanksgiving dinner was already halfway over when my mom smiled at me and said it. "Sister's wedding was beautiful," she said, reaching for the potatoes. "When's yours?" The table stayed relaxed, forks moving, glasses clinking. I looked at her, then at my dad, then back at my plate. "I already had it," I said. That got their attention. My mom frowned slightly. "You mean you're planning it?" "No," I said. "I mean I had it." Silence crept in, slow and uncomfortable. My dad laughed once, like he thought I was joking. "Very funny." "You both got invitations," I said. "They were sent months ago." My mom's smile disappeared. Her hand froze midair. "We never got anything," she said quickly. She looked at my dad for confirmation. He nodded. Nothing came to the house. The table went quiet in a way that felt different from before. Heavier. Focused. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I reached into my bag and pulled out my phone. "Hold on," I said. I opened my email, scrolled once, then turned the screen toward them. Delivery confirmations. Dates. Times. Every invitation marked delivered. Every one signed for. My mom leaned closer. My dad squinted. Neither of them spoke, because suddenly the question wasn't whether the invitations were sent. It was who made sure they never reached them. And sitting there at that table, watching the realization spread across their faces, I felt something settle quietly in my chest. Now I knew exactly where to look. No one reached for their fork. The food sat untouched, cooling in front of us like it had lost its purpose. My mom stared at my phone, then looked up too fast. "That doesn't make sense," she said. Her voice was calm, but her jaw had tightened. My dad leaned back in his chair. "Sometimes delivery companies mess things up," he said, too quickly. I nodded. "They do," I agreed. I scrolled again. Same address, same signature, same date. I didn't say anything else. I didn't need to. Across the table, my sister shifted in her seat. Just once. Enough for me to notice. She hadn't spoken since the moment I pulled out my phone. Not to deny it. Not to agree. She kept her eyes on her plate like something there required intense concentration. That's when the room changed. My mom followed my gaze. So did my dad. It happened slowly. Not accusation. Recognition. "Who signed for these?" my mom asked, still not looking at my sister. "The name's there," I said. I didn't read it out loud. I watched my sister's shoulders tense. Just slightly. My dad cleared his throat. "Maybe there was a mix-up," he said again, weaker this time. No one responded, because a mix-up doesn't explain silence. It doesn't explain a wedding no one mentioned. It doesn't explain why my sister suddenly wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. I sat back in my chair and folded my hands. The hardest part wasn't proving anything. It was realizing how long someone had been comfortable making decisions for me without ever expecting to be seen. And now that the proof was on the table, there was nowhere left for it to hide. My name is Eliza. I'm the older one, which, in my family, never meant priority. It meant responsibility. Growing up, I was the reasonable one, the one who didn't need reminders, the one who handled things quietly so no one else had to. When my sister wanted something, it became a discussion. When I wanted something, it became an assumption that I'd understand if it didn't happen. I did, for a long time. I didn't make a big announcement about my wedding. I didn't turn it into a spectacle. We chose a date that worked for us. We sent invitations early. We followed up once, then let it go. Because I believed something simple. If people wanted to be there, they would be. Sitting at that Thanksgiving table, watching my parents process what was on my phone, I realized how naive that had been. This wasn't forgetfulness. It wasn't poor communication. It was interference. My sister still hadn't said a word. She'd gone very still, like a child hoping movement wouldn't draw attention. That silence told me more than any confession could have. She hadn't needed to explain herself. She just decided. Decided my wedding didn't need witnesses. Decided my parents didn't need to choose. Decided for everyone. And the worst part wasn't that she'd done it. It was that she'd done it confidently, like she never expected the truth to show up at the table. But there it was. Signed for, dated, And suddenly, all the years of misunderstandings had a shape and a name. My mom was the first to speak. "Eliza," she said carefully, "why wouldn't she tell us?" She wasn't asking me. Not really. She was asking the version of the story she'd been carrying for years to hold together a little longer. My dad leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Your sister wouldn't do that," he said, but there was no conviction behind it. I watched my sister pick at the edge of her napkin. She didn't look surprised, just exposed. "I didn't want to stress you," she said finally. Her voice was soft, practiced. "You had so much going on with my wedding," she added. My mom nodded immediately, as if that explained everything. I waited, because explanations only matter when they account for the outcome. "You signed for the invitations," I said. Still calm. They didn't disappear. My sister's eyes flicked up, then down again. "I thought we'd talk about it later," she said. "You didn't say it was that important." That landed harder than anything else she could have said. Not denial, not apology, a judgment. My dad exhaled slowly. "Is that true?" he asked her. She shrugged, and in that small, dismissive movement, years of quiet decisions came into focus. I realized then this wasn't about my wedding. It was about who was allowed to be celebrated without competition, and who wasn't. The silence that followed wasn't angry. It was the sound of something finally being seen for what it was. And once that happens, there's no folding it back up again. No one rushed to fix it. That's what stood out to me. My mom didn't reach for my hand. My dad didn't raise his voice. They just sat there, recalibrating, as if they were reviewing a memory and realizing it had been edited. My sister took a sip of water, buying time. "I didn't think it would matter," she said. "It was small. Intimate. Small. Intimate. Words people use when they're minimizing something that didn't belong to them. It mattered to me," I said. My voice didn't crack. I didn't need it to. My mom looked between us, back and forth, like she was watching two versions of her children collide. "You should have told us," she said to my sister. "Not why did you do this. Just you should have told us." That was familiar. Accountability softened just enough to stay comfortable. My dad rubbed his face. "We missed it," he said quietly. Not apologetic, just factual. I nodded. "Yes," I said. "You did." The table stayed quiet again. Different this time. Heavier. Permanent. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding that could be smoothed over with dessert. This was proof. Proof that choices had been made for me. Signed for. Filed away. And sitting there, watching everyone absorb that, I realized something important. I didn't need an apology to move forward. I just needed to stop pretending this was accidental. Dinner eventually resumed. Someone passed the gravy. Someone commented on how dry the turkey was. The normalcy felt forced, like a reset no one had earned. My sister relaxed a little once the conversation moved on. Not relieved. Confident. She'd done what she needed to do. The truth had come out, and the world hadn't ended. That told her everything. My mom leaned toward me. "I wish you'd said something sooner," she whispered. I looked at her. "I sent invitations," I said. "I planned a wedding. I showed up." She nodded, but her eyes drifted away before the words could settle. That was the pattern. Acknowledgement without weight. Across the table, my sister laughed at something my dad said. The sound was familiar, unbothered. I realized then what hurt the most. Not that my wedding was missed, but that the damage was survivable for everyone else. No one was devastated. No one demanded answers. They were already adapting. That's when it became clear this conversation wasn't about repair. It was about information finally catching up to behavior. I finished my meal slowly, tasting each bite. When I stood to clear my plate, my mom looked up, startled. "Already?" "Yes," I said. I wasn't leaving angry. I was leaving informed. And once you're informed, staying at the table out of habit feels like a choice you don't need to keep making. I didn't make a scene when I left. I said thank you. I hugged my parents. I nodded at my sister. Everything looked normal from the outside. That mattered to them. In the car, my phone buzzed once. Then again. A message from my mom. "We'll talk more later." Not "I'm sorry." Not "I didn't know." just a promise to revisit something once it was less uncomfortable. I didn't reply, because later had already happened. Later was the wedding they missed. Later was the silence that followed. Later was the moment I sat across from proof and watched everyone adjust instead of react. By the time I got home, the weight of it had settled. Not grief, not anger, clarity. I understood now why my sister never asked about my plans, why my parents never followed up, why no one questioned the gap. They trusted her to manage things, and she had, just not in my favor. That night, I deleted the delivery confirmations from my phone. I didn't need them anymore. The evidence wasn't the receipts. It was how quickly everyone accepted the truth once it was impossible to deny. Some realizations don't change relationships overnight. They change expectations. And once your expectations shift, so does your willingness to keep explaining yourself to people who were comfortable not knowing. The next week was quieter than I expected. No family meeting, no dramatic phone calls, just small messages that skirted the point. My mom sent a photo of leftovers she'd frozen. My dad asked if I'd made it home safely. My sister sent nothing at all. That absence felt intentional. It was easier for her to wait it out than to acknowledge what she'd done. She'd always been good at that. At work, things moved on. Deadlines, meetings, normal life. That contrast made everything clear. The people who showed up for me didn't need explanations. They already had context. The people who didn't were suddenly very careful with their words. A few days later, my mom called again. This time, she opened with congratulations. It sounded practiced. I thanked her and waited. She filled the silence with updates. Your sister's busy. Things are complicated. Everyone's tired. I listened without interrupting. Then she asked, quietly, "So, what do we do now?" I looked around my kitchen. Simple. Quiet. Mine. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I know I'm not pretending this didn't happen." She didn't argue. Because once something has a shape, you can't unsee it. And once you stop pretending, people have to decide whether they're willing to meet you where you are, or stay where they've always been. Thanksgiving came and went, but the tension didn't dissolve with the leftovers. It settled instead. Low. Persistent. Family group chats stayed active, but lighter. Careful. Like everyone was avoiding a topic that might crack the surface again. My sister posted photos from her honeymoon planning. Smiling captions. No comments turned off. I didn't react. Not out of bitterness. Out of understanding. Engaging would have meant pretending we were still playing the same game. We weren't. A few relatives reached out privately. They asked how my wedding was. Said they wished they'd known. I thanked them. I didn't explain, because explanations invite debate, and I wasn't negotiating reality anymore. The invitations had been sent. They had been signed for. That part was settled. What wasn't settled was how everyone would live with knowing that. I noticed small shifts. My mom asked before making plans. My dad listened longer than usual. My sister avoided direct conversations altogether. No apologies. No confrontations. Just distance reshaped into caution. And that was enough for me. Sometimes the biggest change isn't someone admitting they were wrong. It's them realizing they can't control the story anymore. And once that happens, you don't need to keep repeating yourself. You just let the silence do the work. I don't bring up my wedding anymore. Not because it hurts. Because it's finished. It happened. It mattered. And it doesn't need validation to stay real. My parents still mention my sister's wedding sometimes. Old habits. Familiar stories. They don't ask about mine unless I bring it up first. I don't. That used to feel like loss. Now it feels like accuracy, because relationships don't break in explosions. They thin out in moments like that Thanksgiving table. A question asked too casually. An excuse accepted too easily. Proof shown and quietly absorbed. What changed wasn't how they saw my sister. It was how clearly I saw the system we'd all been operating in. And once you see it, you stop volunteering to be managed by it. I didn't confront anyone again. I didn't demand accountability. I adjusted. I stopped assuming inclusion. Stopped waiting for follow-ups. Stopped explaining my life to people who were comfortable not knowing it. Some people noticed. Some didn't. That's fine. The delivery receipts did their job, not by exposing someone, but by showing me exactly where I stood. And once you know that, you don't need silence to feel awkward. You let it be honest instead.